All right, we are back again. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another video. Appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're looking at me like, man, you look like you're wearing the same thing you were wearing in the last video, that's because I am. I'm trying to knock out as many of these videos as I can real quick while I have downtime dealing with just nasty, nasty weather outside, still dealing with the remnants from Hurricane Helen, I believe she was. It's the day after the storm. We really didn't necessarily have anything here. It's still gusting to 35 outside though, but it was kind of eye-opening to me and my wife Breezy both, how powerful this storm really was, being that we were hundreds of miles, a couple hundred miles from this thing. And the effects, although we didn't have any damage, we didn't even lose power, but the effects that we felt from the storm being that far away it's pretty crazy. It hits you a little bit different, although me and Breezy are both born and raised here in South Florida and have ridden out many hurricanes. It's a little different when you're looking at your 2-year-old and your 3-month-old sitting at home. What would we have had to do if the storm was coming our way? And again, we still had gusts well over 50 miles an hour. There was a few tornadoes that touched down around us, but we had no effects at all. But a lot of our friends and people we know over on the west coast of Florida, we know a lot of people that did not fare so well. For all I know, I think most of the northwest coast of Florida is pretty much demolished after they just got done recovering from the last big storm we had a couple of years ago. So just continue to think about those people. Give any way you can, donate, help. I'm sure there will be donation pages or ways to help that will be being shared here, by the end of today. Things will be going around. Bring supplies, whatever it might be. But any pages that I find or any ways that are posted on social media that are ways to be able to help those in need, I will be sure to share those on my page. So if you don't follow me already, follow Tight Splice Charters on Instagram or Facebook, and I will share or list any ways that we're able to assist those over there, because it looks like a war zone. Not in a time where I feel like this country just wants to give everything and anything to anyone else outside the country. Not to really get political, but I feel like we need to concentrate and help those in need that are here, at home. So, not good, terrible for them. I mean, it's, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people are very, bad off right now. So, just continue to think about them, and again, help any way you can. That's my favor I ask of you guys, because I'm sure me and Breezy will be doing or donating whatever we possibly can. But got that. We're still dealing with it. That's why I'm not fishing. But I'm going to try and knock out this video real quick, because this is one of the most commonly asked questions that I get. It probably is the most commonly asked question, and it's a very broad question. It's the same question being asked about different baits and techniques. And basically it's, what do I use braid for? Like what baits, what presentation do I use braid for? And when do I use fluorocarbon or mono when fishing on Lake Okeechobee? You guys know I'm probably the most simplistic fisherman there is. I keep it simple. So I'm going to kind of just run through the gamut here. All right. And just to let you guys know, if I'm talking about braided line, I throw everything I throw braid on with 65-pound test braid. I don't play around with 50 just because I haven't had a need to. And if I can get bit on the heavier line, why not do it? I have thought about switching to 50 to experiment with some stuff, but I just haven't done that yet. So if I decide to go and move forward and do that, then I will make a video on it and letting you guys know what the turnout is. But the only thing, and we'll start with it, that I do not throw 65-pound braid on would be a walking bait, like a Zara spook. You guys know I love throwing a big spook around. And I was throwing it on 50, but I've been throwing that on 40. Obviously, the lighter line gives you that longer cast, and it's less drag in the water when that bait's trying to slash from side to side. You guys know when I walk a spook, I really like to make that thing walk aggressive and really spit water. So the lighter, smaller diameter line helps that bait perform correctly. So I'm really liking 40. 30 was a little too thin. It would backlash real easy. It would backlash and pop and break on a heavy cast. So I bounce back and forth between 40 and 50, and really it just depends on what's on sale. All right. But that's the only thing I'll use that lighter line for. I did play around with mono with a spook, but obviously you can't compete with braid. On a long cast, that spook will still walk true at the end of an 80-yard cast. So 40 to 50 pound braid with that. Everything else for a braid application is 65, including, yes, a swim jig. A lot of people throw a swim jig on 50. I get bid on 65. I've thought about playing with 50. I don't. All right, 65-pound braid for a swim jig. A swim bait, like a Big Easy, that is always on braid. I can't really think of a time where I'll throw that on a fluorocarbon line. So I throw that. A frog, obviously, throw that on braid. And then, flipping, okay? And we're going to put an asterisk next to flipping because if I'm flipping a half ounce or heavier, which I really never use a half, I traditionally, let's say a 3/4 ounce or heavier, I'm flipping 65-pound braid. You guys know I like the Suffix Performance braid, and that's pretty much all I use. And obviously, if I'm flipping mats or what have you, that's just my confidence. That's what I like. There are some people that do flip like a jig on 25-pound fluorocarbon, and that works for them. That's great. I just don't do that. And I will flip a Senko style bait, all right, with 20-pound fluoro, but that's also the same line and the same setup I'm using to cast a Senko or a speed worm or a burner worm. So we'll move into that. Any type of worm presentation, whether it's a Senko or a speed worm style bait, I'm throwing that on 20-pound fluorocarbon. I will go down to 17 sometimes. I don't think there's that big of a difference. So that's a fluorocarbon application. Now, there are plenty of people that swim a speed worm with braid. And obviously you can do that. But for whatever reason, I do not like swimming a worm. Although I'm throwing a burner worm style bait that I think is designed to intentionally to swim through grass, I can honestly say I don't think I've ever caught a fish doing that. I throw the bait out and fish it like a ribbon tail worm, give it long strokes, like drag it across the bottom. That's when I like to throw a worm. So in doing that, if you were to throw heavy braided line and do that, I feel like the fish get a really good look at it. The bait's moving slow and they might see that braid. So I always exclusively throw it on 20-pound fluorocarbon or just on fluorocarbon in general. But again, that's just my preference. A rattle trap. All right, so a crankbait, a rattle trap. I used to throw everything on 20, but I am starting to scale down a little bit and throw it on 17 because I think you get a little bit more action out of the bait, especially with something like a half-ounce lipless. That little bit smaller diameter helps that bait swim a little better, or even like a square bill or a hybrid hunter. I feel like the bait hunts a little more with that little bit lighter line. Alex, I'm going to take another shot at you. He throws 14. I'm sure you get more bites. I'm sure the bait runs a little better. But I just don't have the cojones to do that. I mean, I like being able to put heat on fish if I'm able to. And here's the thing. Everyone talks about getting the bite, but if you don't get the bite, well, I shouldn't say that. The bite gives you the chance to catch the fish. But I always say if I lose a 7-pound fish in a tournament, it's going to be worse than me never getting the bite. Because if you don't get the bite, in your mind, you're just like, man, where are they? What am I doing wrong? If you get a 7-pounder and he breaks you off, and in your mind, you went a little light on your line, the rest of the day, it's, I knew I shouldn't have thrown that light of line. I knew I shouldn't have thrown that bait on that. Why did I lose that fish? I had the fish and I lost it, and your mind starts spiraling. So at least that's how my mind works. So I just exclusively pretty much throw 17. Treble hook bait, crankbait, rattle trap, whatever. I'll throw that on. A lot of times I even throw it on mono more than fluoro, be honest with you. But I throw that on that. And then I guess last would be a chatterbait, a vibrating jig. This is kind of the toss-up where a lot of people throw it on thin braid. And I exclusively throw it on 17 or 20-pound fluorocarbon. That's another one that I'm starting to go to 17 a little more. Again, it's a little bit thinner. So I think your bait's going to run a little true. It'll get that bait a little bit deeper in the water column. And you can still put a good amount of heat on them. But I don't ever throw it on braid. And I know a lot of people do. The sensitivity is unreal, and that's a big reason for me not throwing braid. Once you get really dialed into your chatterbait setup, it's crazy, but you can literally feel the fish come up behind the bait with braid, and you can even do it with fluorocarbon. But it's even more accentuated on braid. You can feel the fish rush up behind the bait and take the water away from the vibrating jig. And I feel like a lot of times when that happens, it goes away and you'll swing prematurely before the fish gets the bait. I want to feel what I can feel, but I almost want to feel a little less with a chatterbait, because I want to just feel that rod load up and continue to just reel into the fish and pull. And I feel like my landing ratio and hookup ratio in general goes way, way up with that. So I stay away from the braid. I like the give. I like the stretch. I like the hesitation, the fish getting the bait. That's what works for me. But like you've maybe heard me and Alex talk about in a few videos, or when I went over and visited him at his HQ, there has been tournaments where we have had 30 to 40 boats in a circle fishing chatterbaits, and the guys throwing it on braid have outfished the guys with fluorocarbon. Is it coincidence? It definitely could be. But there's no denying that chatterbait is clacking, and I mean working harder with braid, being that there's no stretch going directly to the bait, than there is with fluorocarbon. So sometimes maybe they want that more aggressive chatter. No way to tell, but either way, at the end of the day, with all of this that I'm saying, use what works for you. If you want to flip an 1.5 ounce weight in a hyacinth mat with 12-pound mono, more power to you, do it. Use what works for you and don't change, unless you're looking to change. Obviously, this is what I say. I say the word exclusively, but sometimes there are little rare instances where that's different, right? I have thrown a swim jig on fluorocarbon before. I can count on one hand the times I've done it, but it's usually around hard structure. Maybe if I'm fishing a shad spawn around like the Kissimmee River Bridge and I'm throwing it around pilings or something, I like that fluorocarbon. But again, that's a very, very nuanced, very coincidental thing. But don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to experiment with pound tests and different types of line, and use what works best for you and what you have confidence in. But that's what I use. That's what type of line I use on my stuff. I hope that helps you guys out. And yeah, that's about it. I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you guys on the next one. Later.